Welcome to the Church Answers podcast. My name is Thom and we're going to talk about the future of denominations. I'll be focusing primarily on American denominations, but many of the American denominations are global, and so there will be some global implications to that as well. Obviously, in two 10-minute podcasts, we're not going to be able to be comprehensive, but I think we can give you some good high-level understanding of what the denominations are, how we got them, and what's happened in many of our denominations today and what is the future of them. Before we get moving further, I want to thank Belay Solutions. They are your virtual solution to find a worker, an executive assistant, a bookkeeper. Go to belaysolutions.com to check out the opportunities, and then check out the download that they've been making available, which is 25 tasks a pastor can delegate to an assistant. You can find that in the show notes, or you can go to belaysolutions.com/Thom Rainer. Okay, let's look at this issue of denominations. Denominations are a gathering of churches, an organization perhaps of churches that have some commonality that have made them associate with each other. Now, in this podcast, we're going to look at the three most common issues that cause denominations to connect. They're not mutually exclusive. Some denominations may have a history of all three of these, and some of these denominations may actually have these commonalities in their name as well. So let's look at this now. You know, what prompted this? Well, I will say this, at least from what we've been watching, there've been the two largest Protestant denominations, the Southern Baptist Convention and the United Methodist Church, have been in a bit of turmoil, and they've certainly had a lot of attention that has been focused upon them. That has caused more and more people to ask the question, what's going on? They read these accounts. They don't know the full history or depth about denominations. And it just seems like there's some pretty messed up denominations. Within the Southern Baptist Convention, there's almost, there have been a series of issues that have arisen. The one that, from my perspective, that had to be addressed so importantly was the issue of sexual abuse within the church, within Southern Baptist churches. And that has been one of the big focuses of the denomination that's gotten a lot of attention. The previous annual meeting had a focus on the role of women in churches. You can read about that. That's not our role. That's not our point to talk about it in this particular podcast. But the SBC has had a lot of attention for that reason. The United Methodist Church has had a lot of attention because they're seeing a significant number of their churches leave the denomination. The primary issue are issues of sexuality, and there's a sense from some of the churches, especially the departing churches, that the United Methodist denomination did not take the biblical stand and their willingness to move in a biblical way toward issues of sexuality, so they're left. Many of them are forming another denomination, Global Methodist. Not all of them are, but many of them are. So those two denominations have caused a lot of people to just ask the question, what's a denomination and what's going on with those denominations? Well, how do we get a denomination? I'll use that for the foundational discussion that we'll have in this first part. Many denominations have doctrinal affinities as the reason that they formed. They may come from a more Reform background. They may specifically have a polity that has denominational or that has doctrinal implications. So these doctrines became the commonality of the churches that joined the denominations. This doctrine can be very tight. In other words, if a church does not hold to it, then that church is literally not a part of that denomination. In some cases, there's a bit of latitude, and churches have a little bit more flexibility within the doctrine, or sometimes it's even a confession. It's called different things at different churches or denominations. But the point is, many denominations founded, one of their primary issues was doctrine. Secondly, many denominations, their churches founded upon geography. Now, let's look at those. You hear me mention the biggest denomination in the United States quite often because it's the biggest denomination in the United States, Southern Baptist Convention. Well, think about the three words in it. Convention means it's churches that have voluntarily decided to be a part of a larger group. So there's one word. And then you got the word Southern. Obviously, this was a denomination that was formed in the South. As a matter of fact, if you go to the origins of the Southern Baptist Convention, the Southern Baptist Convention was formed because they wanted to be able to have slave owners serve as missionaries, slave owning families. And so the Southern Baptist Convention pulled away from predecessor denominations so that they could have that denomination. Not a very good beginning, obviously, but that was part of their history. Now, to be fair to Southern Baptists, they have acknowledged their sinfulness and their error in that starting, and they have asked for forgiveness. But that was part of who they were. Uh, Founded basically upon, can slave owners be missionaries? And so they put South in front of it because they represented the view of the old Confederacy. There was not a Confederacy then because they were formed. Uh, but anyway, the point was they were Southern. They were Southern. Today, Southern Baptist Convention is all in all 50 states, and some of its fastest growth has been outside of the South. There have been debates within the denomination about whether they should keep Southern in the name. In one particular meeting in a year, they decided to call themselves the Great Commission Baptists, but that's an alternative name to Southern Baptist. Still, the more common name is Southern Baptist. Another reason is not only doctrinal and geographical, but ethnicity and race. Some denominations were formed when immigrants came to America, and I'm talking about American denominations. And so they formed around sometimes a common language, sometimes a common ethnicity, sometimes a common race. These are why we have denominations. Now, again, this is not an exhaustive list, and it is not an exclusive list. You can have a denomination that was formed for doctrinal, geographical, ethnic, and racial reasons. You can have all three of them. But I wanted to just let you know why some denominations were formed, why you may hear something in their name which would indicate it. Again, we talked about Southern Baptist Convention. You had the region, the South, Southern. You had convention represented as a denomination, and then Baptists representing their doctrine, their particular Baptistic doctrine. This is how we got denominations. I thought that it might be important to give you those foundational points before we get a little bit deeper into what we're seeing for the future of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to just stop here, and we're going to jump to the next podcast, which will be episode number 63, The Future of Denominations Part 2. And we're going to talk about what do we see, particularly with American denominations, as we're moving forward in the future. So thank you for being a part of this podcast. Really, it's two parts to it. I try to keep these short, under 10 minutes, but there's no way I could do any kind of justice to denominational life in less than two podcasts. So I hope you'll jump back on episode number 63, The Future of Denominations Part 2, as we talk about which denominations, not in name, but types of denominations are growing and which are declining. We'll talk about that in the next issue of the Church Answers Podcast, episode of Church Answers Podcast. As always, we thank Belay Solutions, our founding, exclusive, and only sponsor. Once again, that's belaysolutions.com. Thank you for being a part of the Church Answers Podcast, and we will continue to try to serve you well in all things local church as we continue to talk about what God is doing in churches just like yours. We will see you in the next episode. Hey, folks, this is a PS to our podcast. We got some exciting stuff that we want to offer you absolutely for free. Sam, when you think about predictive factors in a church's growth, if you take out demographics, what are some things that come to mind? Just two. I mean, don't give me a list of 10. Just two or three things that come to mind on predictive growth of a church.
Well, evangelism and whether the church is doing it or not.
Bingo.
And then I will add, is it an ongoing evangelism emphasis?
Double bingo. Well? Double, and maybe something about leadership and their commitment to that. So all of the above.
Evangelistic churches have evangelistic pastors. Is the staff, is the lead pastor doing the work themselves.
We have a free download for you, and it's actually a sheet that you can self-score. You answer 20 questions, anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and we come back and we predict what your growth rate is going to be for the next year in worship attendance. It's not a perfect tool, but it's a good tool. There's a link to that for the attendance predictor. Look in the show notes. You'll absolutely love it. That's cool. We'll see you soon.